you doing? My name is,
Preparing to live stream the meeting. This meeting is being live streamed. Preparing to live stream. Let's see. We're about to be on YouTube. All right, we are now live.
Awesome. Hi, Josh.
Hey, Maria, how are you?
I am doing well. How are you?
We are finally on our first episode of our podcast.
Yes. We've been meaning to do this since September.
Yeah, it's been a couple months in the works, but I feel like no better start than now. Yeah.
Better late than never. Definitely.
Yeah, better late than never. So
we finally are here.
Yeah, for our viewers, hey guys, welcome to our podcast. Our podcast is called Rallying Thoughts. My name is Josh, and this is
Maria.
Yes, and we've known each other for so long, and this is something that we have been talking about, and super excited to bring you guys. And I'll just go ahead into what I think this podcast should be about, and something that you guys can maybe look forward to. And me and Maria are both tennis players. We are also tennis coaches. We've been around the sport for a very long time. And for me personally, I always wanted to have something where I could verbally talk about tennis. A lot of people that are not into tennis are not necessarily knowing the ins and outs, but me being a tennis nerd and me playing my whole entire life, I love talking about it, and it's something that I have a lot of passion for. And I feel like me and Maria share that, and we share a lot of things in tennis, and we've talked about a whole bunch of different ideas throughout the years.
Yeah, we've been discussing during all our conversations. We've been thinking of ideas, coming up with a product, or coming up with a coaching strategy, or just different ways to improve the game of tennis. And one day we were speaking and we were thinking, hey, wait a second, we've been speaking so many times, we connect on a great level, we have great chemistry, we come up with great ideas. There's nothing better than to bring this podcast alive and share all our ideas, and that's why we're here. So
and we are super excited to bring this to you. I mean, I'm super ecstatic, especially now that we are rocking and rolling, right? So really quick, Maria, how do we know each other? Like, how do we meet? How did this whole thing come about?
So Josh and I, as he touched base with you guys, we used to play back in the day. I used to coach for several years. Actually, let me give you a quick backstory on my life. I'm actually Greek. I was born and raised in Athens, Greece. I traveled abroad for high school in London, ended up in California. I had a tennis scholarship then, so I played for a junior college over there. Then I moved over to Florida. Didn't know what I wanted to do. I studied in marketing. Long story short, I had family telling me, Maria, you should coach. You've been playing tennis for a very long time. And I was like, no, I just enjoy playing. I ended up starting a few lessons, and instantly I felt a connection with my students. I had a love for the sport, but a love for teaching. And not everyone finds that. Some people end up moving in and they become players, and other people they turn into tennis coaches. And sometimes people just fizzle off and they just want to play and hit around with friends, and they don't want to coach, and that's perfectly fine. But long story short, I was coaching back in 2007, 2008. Josh was 16, 17 years old at the time. That's he is the son of a coach that used to train Osceola High School, which is located in Kissimmee, Florida.
Right.
And Josh and I used to go out there, hit on the court. He would, one thing I love about you, Josh, is that you always had a hunger to go out there and hit. And it didn't matter who it was. You saw someone hitting against the wall, or you saw me coaching, you would always come up and say, hey, you want to hit after? And we would play doubles and singles. And sometimes we didn't even score. We just went out there and just to engage. And I always felt that drive from you. Then we lost contact for a little bit. I ended up coaching in Hunters Creek
Yeah, staying
and
in Central Florida area, right?
Central Florida. Yes,
Yeah,
Hunters Creek is located in Central Florida for all of those of you who don't know where that is.
yeah.
And yeah, you came back and we started hitting again. I will say
Yeah.
this, Josh wanted to hit more tennis balls. I enjoyed chatting a lot.
Yeah,
I don't know
yeah.
why he continued to want to still play, but no, the
Yeah,
time I wanted to chit chat.
especially towards that last stint of you playing tennis, it was definitely more let's go play for an hour, but then about 20 minutes of that hour would be us chatting it up. And I felt like this is the best thing that we could do is start a podcast, especially because since we both love to talk and we both love to talk about tennis, I think it's a good match, right?
Exactly. What about you want to give the viewers a little bit of your background?
Sure. So I'm born and raised out of well, I was born in Orlando, but I'm raised out of Kissimmee, Florida, Central Florida area. If you don't know, very close to Orlando, very close to Disney World for people that don't know. And my dad was a tennis coach and he taught at my high school, but started playing when I was about maybe 10, 9, and then I didn't really take it serious until I was about 13, 14. And that's when I really wanted to play. And that was kind of where like my eyes were more open to how good I could be or how good I am compared to other players, right? And then me and Maria met because my home court was where she started teaching. And then I would always ask her to hit. And thank God she would let me hit with her, which was awesome because I got to hit with a really good player and it made me work on my game. And I also just opened that door to coaching. And I think I wouldn't be a coach today if it wasn't for Maria. So thank you, Maria, for all the
Aw,
things that you did.
of
Uh,
course, of
because
course.
she would see me, we would hit, especially when I came back. I actually went into the military after high school. I played on my high school team. When I graduated high school, joined the military, went to the Navy. When I came back to the Navy, I actually ran into Maria at one of the tennis courts in Central
Hunters Creek.
Florida. Yeah, in Hunters Creek. And I was like, wow, I haven't seen you in years. How are you doing? And we kind of caught up that way. And then she kept playing. And then uh, through that, we just stayed in contact. She ended up moving away. So like we're not even she's not in the Central Florida area anymore, even though I
And I
am.
don't teach anymore. He actually coaches a few of the students I referred Josh to.
Right.
And yeah,
And
and then
it's so interesting how the tennis world is such a small world, right? It's like
very small.
especially like in the Florida area, so small. It's like everybody, and if they
Exactly.
don't know you, you know somebody that knows them, which is
Exactly.
awesome. That's one thing that
And
I
I guess
really
that's
love
in
about the
every
sport.
every field, you in any field you engage in. There's a common ground. Like you find many people that if they're not directly, if they don't directly know you,
Sure.
they know someone that knows you.
Yeah,
Um,
and then growing up playing tennis, I always wanted to play college tennis. And then when I ended up getting out of the military, that was one of my goals was to play college tennis. But then I ended up getting injured, and I still had a love for the game. And I wasn't quite coaching then, even though I was working all kind of weird jobs. And I would complain about my jobs to Maria, and she'll say, "Why don't you become a tennis coach? You're so personable, and this and that." I'm like, "Oh, I just want tennis to be my hobby." And that's what I would constantly tell her. But then eventually,
Man,
I gave
that's
in
the way I was when I first started. And then
for
as
sure.
soon as you start, it's that magic, it's
Yeah,
that beauty about coaching. What I love about coaching, and I'm sure Josh, you can agree, is you learn so much about yourself
sure.
and learning through kids, teaching kids, that connection is very special, which we can delve into in another episode.
Sure.
I do you want to go ahead and tell our viewers what the name of the podcast is?
Well, yeah. The name is Rallying Thoughts, and I think it's a perfect name for us because we have all these thoughts in our head, and we have all of these ideas, and we're not sure on very communicating to one another. And I think it's interesting that we can come up with the same topic and talk about that topic for 30 minutes or talk about that topic for 45 minutes. And it's so nice because it is like tennis, in tennis, you have a
Exactly.
ball, that ball's going back and forth over the net. And we call that a rally. So rallying thoughts is really kind of a nod to tennis, but as well is exactly what we're doing here. Like we can bring up a subject. That subject might start on my side of the court and then it'll go back to hers and then come
I
back to
like
me.
that.
And
Yeah.
then at the end of the conversation, I feel like we can, just like in tennis, we can shake it out, give a good handshake, and then keep going about our day, which is awesome.
Definitely. And one thing I want to mention to our viewers is, although it's mainly geared around tennis, we will be discussing a little bit more, and we're not going to focus so much on just the players and the results
Sure.
and all the wow factors. We're going to
Right.
delve into mental health, how that affects tennis, skills, coaching, fitness. There's just so many aspects behind that game that you watch on TV that many people are not aware about that. And the reason
Sure.
why we're actually doing this podcast is because we want everyone to be included and feel
Right.
included, even if you don't play tennis, or even if you play tennis recreationally, or whether you're professional. We
And
feel that. Go ahead, Josh. Sorry.
you're fine. I feel that, especially in our sport,
Yeah.
and this is something that we've talked about plenty of times, but in basketball, if you play basketball, you're a baller. If you play golf, you're a golfer. And in tennis, it's not quite like that. I think there is more like an elitist mentality where tennis players, quote unquote, are really competitive tennis players, the ones that have played college competitively or have played in the pros or the amateurs. When in my opinion, and I think Maria thinks the same way, but
Mhm.
in my opinion, I think anybody that picks up a racket and goes out there and plays is a tennis player. But in our sport, um, I don't feel like those players are necessarily heard, and I don't think those players they don't really shine a light on those players as much. Obviously, there's not cameras following those people and things like that, but I think there should be a lot more inclusion in our sport, and that's one
Much
thing that I
more.
think me and Maria, our goal for this podcast would be to bring that inclusion. Maybe show
And
how these competitive tennis players are human, just like we are human. Yeah,
and
for
what
sure.
better way to start a podcast where you were born and raised in the US. I was born and raised in Greece.
Right?
I'm female, you're male,
Sure.
and yet we can connect on a deep level and discuss this sport. And one thing I remember back in the day, of course, things have changed and evolved over time.
Yeah.
When we used to play college tennis and travel, we would hang out with the guys and talk to them. But when it
Right.
came down to the game, I felt like I was just discussing this with my girlfriends, and the
Right.
guys would discuss their game. I don't feel I ever had a discussion about tennis in depth as I do with you, being a male and me being a female.
Yeah.
So I think that's very important.
For sure.
By no means am I a feminist in
Right.
that sense, but I feel that there needs to be that respect,
Sure.
and everyone should have their ears open because we can all learn from each other.
Yeah.
So,
So do you feel like there is a difference between uh female tennis and male tennis? Let's say like the WTA and the ATP. Do you think there is a difference between women's tennis and male's tennis or men's tennis? And I want to get your perspective because you are female and you did play
yeah.
at a high level. So do you see, or is there a difference that you can really see or point out for our viewers that might be different between male's tennis and female tennis?
This is a tricky question. You can
It
look
is
at it
tricky because I think, there's been a lot of things said about this, especially in today's world where like a lot of people might say, well, men should play women and women should play men. And I know that I'm at a level where there's definitely girls that can beat me on the court for sure,
I understand.
um, but I also think the women do play tennis a little differently than the men's do. And
Yeah.
I witnessed that. And I wanted to get your thoughts on that. Do you think there is a visual difference between men's tennis and women's tennis?
I feel very strongly about there being equality and people
Sure.
viewing it as equality.
Right.
However, when it comes to strength and ability,
Mm-hmm.
if you were to put a man and a woman and they trained the same
Right.
and they trained at the same level, or they train for the same amount of hours, or you push them both very hard,
Right.
naturally I have to accept that
Sure.
a man is more physically, I'm not saying better,
Right.
physically more stronger and more has
Maybe
naturally it's
durable.
more yes, because we have to face it and we have to be realistic.
Right.
In the animal kingdom, you have, let's say, the lioness is stronger than or it is more beautiful, than the male. Then
Right.
you have the peacock, or you'll have as a female or male dog, you may have one that's more dominant than the
Sure.
other. But in the
Sure.
human race, a man has more capability when it comes to strength. You guys are hunters. You guys are
Right.
the ones that protect the female. Now, going back to tennis, are there women that can beat many male players? Sure,
Right.
because women do have an analytical mindset.
Right.
So maybe not necessarily with strength, but with tactic or
Right.
mindful game. Yes, they can beat you, but I do feel that men are so quick and have that physique, that nature, that I just feel it would be wrong for me to say that a woman could compete on a professional level. Of
Mm.
course, could a WTA female beat a college player or a high school player?
Sure.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But you can, and we welcome our listeners to
Right.
come back, give us feedback on your thoughts
Yeah.
about this.
It's funny because I agree with you. I think there are women that play at a very, very high level that could be a lot of men, whether they're in college or not, but I also kind of want to open the door, and I'm sorry, Maria, because I'm kind of like throwing curveballs at you.
No, you're
But
fine.
I also wanted to open the door to this conversation, which I think should be a conversation. In boxing or in MMA or in fighting, there are weight classes, right? And in tennis, I don't think weight class is as important as it is in fighting, but I do think that height is important in tennis
Huge
versus
point that you're bringing up right now. Huge point.
other sports, right? Where
Yes.
you don't see many players under this, I don't know, 5'9" that are playing at a very high level. Most of the players that are on tour or making very good living are above 6 foot.
I
Now,
definitely think that the height has a greater advantage. So if you have a tall female player that's serving to a shorter man, she has an
absolutely.
advantage, because the serve, as everybody knows, or those of you that don't know, is the first shot that could set you up for success or winning the point.
And the most important shot, honestly. I mean, there's players out there that have a bomb serve. Nick Kyrgios is one,
Yeah.
and he's huge. He's a tall dude. He's amazing, a great player,
Yeah.
but he is a humongous dude with a huge serve, which gives him an edge. What I would like to fight for, or something that I would like to see in the years to come, is possibly a short men's tennis league, like maybe a league for
That would be very interesting. A short
7
man's
and
tennis
under,
league.
because I think it
Mhm.
would show a different side of the game where, just like in fighting, you have the heavyweights. The heavyweights fight nothing like lightweights because they don't have to. The heavyweights have
Mhm.
huge punches. They can end the fight with one punch. Where I think if you were to have a league where you have shorter tennis players playing, I think it would show how amazing these athletes are and show more of a technical side of the game that could be evolved for taller players.
Mhm.
But because these players maybe are so long and so tough to beat, you don't necessarily see it. You know, you might see, obviously there are players that are amazing and they're like at 6 foot or maybe even at 5'11" and they're making a living. But I think that there are also amazing tennis players that are 5'2" or 5'4" that
You're
could
making a
make a
very
living.
good point, Josh, and sorry to interrupt you.
You're good.
We had Stefanos Tsitsipas, who was serving, I believe, I want to say against Nadal. I can't
Sure.
remember which match this was in particular. It was he was serving against someone else in the Australian Open.
Yeah.
And his serve was just, you know, please, I'm not taking away his game. He's got a fantastic game. He wouldn't be in the top 5 if he didn't play a phenomenal game. Your serve is not the only thing that can carry you throughout a match.
Right.
However, I'd like to see exactly like you're saying. Say you had, like back in the day, you had Ivan Isavic with a huge serve. You have Stefanos Tsitsipas. You even have a few other players, Nick Kyrgios. To see them with huge serves play against each other, would it be a serve return, bam, and point throughout the match? Or would they have to change up their serve? Or would someone have to, would they have to change their return to keep the point in play to not allow the server to win just on the serve? So it'd be interesting to see how the game would change. And then those that don't have big serves or are shorter players, but they're faster on their feet because they're shorter, but they're fast. Sure. How would their games play out? Would we have longer points? What would we see different? Exactly. So that's a very good point that you brought up.
Yeah, and I think we can revisit that. I think that'll be an interesting conversation to even have with like a professional tennis players and see what their thoughts on that is, because, you know, I think tennis should be more inclusive. And I think, yes, tennis players can play at a high level, but I don't think we see the highest of level because not every single player is included. Now, yes, if we're playing traditional tennis with the serve, it's going to favor somebody who's bigger. And somebody that can serve and volley is going to favor somebody that's bigger. But I think it'll be interesting to see if there was a league that was meant for shorter players. And I think we see that on the women's side, right? Women are naturally shorter. You see more longer rallies. You see not so hard of serves. But I think it'll be really interesting to see short guys play against short guys, you know, and that just might be a biased thing.
Against tall women.
Yeah, possibly. I think that'll be possible, you know. I think that'll be interesting. And I know that's not something that we're getting ready for, but I just wanted to throw that in there.
And it's funny that Joshua brings this up because there's so many times we've had conversations since we actually wanted to go live in September and things happened, life unfolded the way it did, and we weren't able to. We've had so many discussions, and every time we kept saying, we've got to wait till we mention this on the podcast, and we kept coming up with great ideas. So we need to speak more on here instead of just, and that's why we're doing this podcast, because naturally we come up with these great ideas, and they're great ideas to speak about on this
amazing
podcast
topics that we can
everybody.
Topics that we can share with everybody and open up for a conversation. Now, I wanted to talk to you about the stage of American tennis right now. You know, we both coach, or we did coach in America, and I feel like we have a little bit of influence on that. I wanted to get your thoughts. Do you like where America's at in the tennis world? Do you think we have some growth? Do you think we fell off, or where do you think we're at right now?
American tennis was really hot back in the day.
For sure.
When you had Agassi, some people can probably give me a heart, Sampras, Kornikova, but again, Kornikova, there might be some discrepancy with that. She was a great player, but people judge, and we have Sampras, we have Agassi, we have a lot of Monica Seles. Everyone passed through. Well, the majority of players passed through Bollettieri. I feel that back then it was hot, but I feel like it's kind of leveled off a little bit.
Okay.
And I feel like other smaller countries are coming up a little bit more. For example, you have the Mouratoglou Academy. You have, I actually read an article about Rafael Nadal, who wanted to go and train, or his family member wanted to go and train in the US, and please quote me if I'm wrong, but
No, go
someone
ahead.
told him to stay and that he can still be a great player in his country.
Oh yeah,
And the biggest fighter I know out in tennis, I mean, they're all great fighters. You can't be in the top 50 or even 100 if you're not a fighter. And
sure.
that's another thing we can talk about in another episode, but
Right.
it is doable. Greece, you have Sakari and you have Tsitsipas. Um, and even with all the scrutiny that Tsitsipas gets, he just plows through it, and he does a very good job. And you have to give it credit for what credit's due. A lot of people assume that only wealthy people, yes, opportunity and money does help, but I feel
Yeah.
that if you do put in a lot of work and you snail your way in the beginning through the tournaments, and you start earning money, and you channel your funds according to the tournaments that are going to help prop you up and to bring you on a higher ranking, then money slowly does start rolling in. And I feel like in today's world, we are including, it's more inclusive than it was before as well. It's more
I
doable, more feasible.
Some people say that Americans are not as hungry as other countries are, and I don't know if that's the reason why we're not that high on, the world rankings and stuff. I definitely think we have a lot of players that are coming up the ranks now that are showing a lot of promise and that could be very, very good players one day. But maybe there is an argument to say that, Americans are a little maybe spoiled. I'm not sure. Or maybe
There's a convenience about being in the US.
yeah,
There is, and it tends to be, it tends to work that way, whether you're from a different country or from America. If your life is
right,
easier, you tend to know. But then I also want to argue the fact that not all people that have it conveniently don't work hard. Many
right,
people have a privileged life and work harder than those that don't come from a privileged life. And
right,
then you have those upset with those people and saying, well, you had it made. Well, you cannot sustain a good living, or if you don't have a work ethic. And I
right.
feel, and I want to point out with what you just mentioned, I believe that yes, it is easier and more convenient to live in the States. However, the entertainment world is so huge that I think it takes
Sure.
away from those that actually do put in the work. Gymnastics,
Oh
they
yeah,
work hard. They work 8 hours a day, probably more.
yeah,
Those few tennis players that are out there, think about it. Football, there's more people involved
yeah. I
in the
mean, I
sport.
I could definitely touch on that. I went to a school where athletics was a high school where the athletics were just, otherworldly. Somebody had graduated with in my class. It was a track star Olympian. There was an NFL player that graduated with my
Really,
class,
I didn't know.
So like there was no short of talent at my school. And
Mhm.
I just think a lot of the players, or if there is an athlete that is showing promise, they will more quickly go to football, basketball, or track than any other sport, because those sports not only are cheap to get in, but if you're showing promise, you can easily get a scholarship, or you can easily move to that next level, right? Where tennis is kind of grueling to get to that highest of level. You have to travel, and you have to have parents and coaching that
And it's a
is
lonelier
really
sport
supporting you.
too.
It's lonely.
It is a lonely sport, and that's what people don't see. They see the fame and the fortune and the glamour that comes with it. But there's a lot of players. Although myself or you, Josh, we haven't been on tour.
Sure.
We can understand where,
Absolutely.
to an extent. And
Yeah.
by all means, with this podcast, the majority of people would expect two people discussing that have had a top ranking in the world. But as coaches, I feel we learn just as much, if not more, from high school players to regular players. We've known players that have been on the tour, and I
Yeah.
feel like in the world of tennis, just you made a great point earlier how everyone is a tennis player as long as they have a racket. They go out there and they fight they
Yeah.
have that hunger to learn.
Yeah.
And another thing that I want us to touch base at some point is there's so many tennis courts. There's more tennis courts than there are swimming pools,
Yeah.
soccer fields. why isn't it as popular? Why is there that stigma? What is it about? And here's another point is, and I think that a lot of people, when it comes to discussing about a particular sport, say me and you or someone else that is involved in football, American football, they start using terminology that a novice or a layman wouldn't understand.
Right.
So it's instead of being included, it's whether you're doing it consciously or subconsciously, you're intimidating the other person as opposed to speaking to include and to engage. So our goal with this podcast is not to portray tennis as this isolated world. We want people to know that anyone can pick up a racket. Yes, there's a cost to a racket, but how many kids nowadays pay for Jordans or Yeezys, or
But
Dr. Martens,
I would say though, the cost to play tennis, yes, it's not, you don't need just a basketball or a soccer ball. You do need equipment,
some direction.
And you do need a little direction. And I think things are getting easier, especially with YouTube and tutorials and all these coaches.
Perfect point.
I mean, we live in a time now where you can literally see how the number one player is holding their racket, their stance, and really see it in slow motion. And then you can have somebody talk over and see what's going on, dry lines. And, there's so much analytics that come into sports nowadays where if you really wanted to learn how to play the game, you could learn. And
you can spend more time on your own learning. So for example, if your coach gives you a few tips, you don't necessarily have to take 5 or 6 private lessons and someone would back in the day. You can go and hit against the wall. You can practice your serve by yourself. You can watch tutorials. There are basic tutorials for those that have never picked up a racket. So there are ways to enhance your game. Definitely.
Absolutely. I agree with that 1000%. And there's no better time than now to really pick up a racket and play this game, because there's so much resources there to help you nowadays, where there was not back in the day, What's another thing I wanted to talk about? Yes, we touched on the stage and where tennis is at in America, but why do you love tennis, Maria? Can you jump into that? Like, what is it about tennis that kind of keeps you coming back to it, or keeps you in this life?
And it's funny that you say that, because I kind of got burnt out teaching so many hours on the court, but I will tell you why I love it. From a young age, I trained like crazy. I trained every day, sweat. I just trained like crazy, 2-3 hours a day, fitness, dedication.
As a junior, right? So like how old were you when you're really training this hard? How old were you? Can you tell me?
I started training more. I picked up a racket when I was 8 years old, and then I started taking more or less lessons around 10, 11, and then I entered a junior tournament under 12 in Greece. And I did great in my first tournament. I can't say I did fantastic years coming, and I can delve into that later on. But I really enjoyed practice and training.
Now, when you went to practice, you're saying 3 hours a day and things like this.
I would say 2 hours a day of training and 1 hour of fitness every day.
Oh, wow. So what would a typical day, maybe, at your age, let's say at, the peak where you're kind of really climbing, you're doing okay in tournaments, or maybe you're not even doing okay, but you really feel a drive to get better. What would be a typical day? Did you go to school? Were you homeschooled? What was a typical day for a junior for you? Like
a typical day for myself, because it wasn't typical for a Greek to go to school and to go to sport, because the popular sport in Greece where most men engaged was soccer and basketball. Those are huge sports. So for myself as a female, which is very few and far between, I went to school. I went to an international school, a British it was an American school, but the curriculum was British. And I would go to school. I would start at 9 a.m, finish at 4. The coach or the bus from my school would drop me off. My father would pick me up. I would go train at the Olympic Stadium, and I would train for 2 hours. Actually, going back, I did have another coach under 12 years. So when I was 14 or
Yeah.
15, I would go and train at the Olympic Stadium. But basically, I would train 2 hours and then 1 hour fitness. I would come home, do my exercises, sit-ups, push-ups. And I would also prior to that, with my fitness, I would have to jog for a good half hour, because what happens is with tennis is you're doing a lot of explosive and anaerobic activity. So
Right.
jogging afterwards would help oxygen flow into my body, and it would help loosen up the muscles. And then I'll come home, do my exercises, have dinner after that, and
Right.
then do my homework, and then go to sleep. So I had very little time to play. So when I did have any opportunity, whether it was at a tournament or at a party or a friend's gathering, is when I let loose, because my whole life was just discipline. And going back to the point where you asked me, what is this drive for tennis? It's this drive to improve, to seeing how far you can stretch your potential, the ability to hit a great shot. I think it mainly comes down to improving, because it doesn't matter whether it's a sport, whether it's a musical instrument, whether it's learning a particular subject. If you see growth, you have the hunger to learn more. When you don't understand something well, that's when you fear it, you have less knowledge, and that's when you don't want to do it. So I was always thrown into a sport. My parents said, I don't mind what you want to do, but we want you to do something that you enjoy.
Sure.
So I don't know if I answered your question. I did.
No, you did. You said that, you felt that love was from improving, and you felt like you wanted to improve. Now, how do you feel like that?
Sorry, real quick. I want to finish the point.
You're good.
I felt I was becoming more agile. I was getting more powerful. I was able to do a lot of things. And we have to always all remember, in our teenage years is when we're our most vulnerable, where we can lack confidence, when we're judged, when, you're in that supposedly cool phase, and if you're able to enjoy something and develop and see improvement, it is a confidence booster for sure.
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
it's a great
especially
outlet.
in this game. Yeah, and especially in this game. The people that play very well, not only do they play very well, but they also have that aura of confidence and that aura of being capable of playing very well,
and you build a huge resilience to many aspects of life. And one thing I can tell you for sure is the discipline I learned from when I was younger followed through into my career of teaching tennis. It teaches you to start, continue, and not stop just because it is hard. And I think nowadays kids are given the, okay, you're not feeling great, go sit down, have a snack.
Not today.
Back then, we used to train when it was raining, when it was snowing. If it was somewhat doable, you did it. So when I was an adult coaching, I had that. I think it's a character. It's a characteristic. Not everyone has that drive, but also learning to be disciplined from a young age definitely helps. It really helps from childhood. It helps you later on in life. Definitely.
I think learning anything hard, like tennis is a very hard sport to learn. Like I mean, and I tell people this all the time: if you go on the tennis court with a racket and you never played tennis before, you won't be able to play a match. Like you just can't. You won't be able to serve the ball.
Tests your patience
and play a match.
Yeah,
I can grab a soccer ball. We could play soccer all day, or I could grab a basketball. We could play a basketball game. But tennis is not like that. It's kind of a different sport. You kind of have to put a lot of hours in before you even can start playing a match. So
absolutely.
I think it's a wonderful sport to learn because it's only you out there, and there's so much discipline that takes place where it has to spill over to other things in life, right?
What's the hunger that grows in for you, though? Because
I would say, growing up where I grew up and playing where I played, my dad was the one that would pull me out on the tennis court. And
did you want to initially, or?
I like to because I got to spend time with my father. So like that was awesome. But then he wanted me to really get good, and I didn't know if I really wanted to be that good at that time. I didn't necessarily see the point, because, and I tell even my players this now, is like, when I was a junior, people would walk past my court and say, wow, you're playing amazing, like, wow, you're such a good player, and that fed my ego, and I thought I was a really good player. So my dad's like,
Isn't
oh, you
it
got to get up.
amazing how we have to wait for validation from others to
Yeah.
realize that we potentially have something going for us?
But I think it backfired on me, because I didn't really see how good players were at my level, because I didn't really enter tournaments or anything like that. I played high
Mhm,
school
mhm,
tennis,
mhm.
but I didn't play tennis on the weekends. My parents just didn't have the money to enter me into tournaments like that. And I think now, like, I kind of have a drive, because I see a lot of potential in junior players, and I know what it takes to get them to that next level. And I'm like, don't make the mistakes I made. Like, let's keep working, let's keep practicing, let's keep better, like, keep getting better. Join some tournaments, see how good the other players are at, in your age group, and then gauge yourself off of there, because you might think you're really good because you haven't missed a forehand, but like, these kids, there's some really good tennis players out there, I'm
I
telling
want
you.
to mention something that you brought up. I think one important topic to bring up is
Sure.
that someone can be a great tennis player, have achieved high rankings,
Hmm.
but not have the instinct or the know-how to engage with a student or
Right.
to help a student. And one thing I
Yeah.
admire about you is, you never played college
Right.
tennis, or you never played on the tour. But even when I was coaching and you were not, I still valued the input that you would give me, and I would use some of that in my lessons
Yeah.
because it was good. It was good, solid information, and it worked. So I want everyone out there to bring their egos down, no matter how far they've gotten. And
Yeah.
and and I'll be honest with you. Initially, when we decided to jump on this podcast, Josh or myself haven't played on the WTA. And
No.
you viewers out there might think, well, what are we going to learn from two people that haven't made those results? Let's not
Sure.
forget, Bollettieri was not a tennis player, but an amazing coach.
Yeah.
And how do you know if you're a good coach? How long do your students stay with you? Is a student going to stay with you because they just like you?
Sure.
No, they're going to stay with you for a long time because they see improvement. No one is going to pay to and they don't see any results. That's something we were speaking about either
And
today or yesterday, I believe.
one thing that
So,
I'm a big proponent on, especially if you're bringing up coaches, I think we need more coaches. And I've
oh my
always thought
goodness,
that way.
yes,
I think there are
yes.
coaches. Yes, there are coaches that are amazing, outstanding. They can teach you anything, but they might not have the patience to work with 4 or 5 year olds. You see what I'm saying? So like you
Yes.
have to be able to meet the player where they're at. Yes, there's amazing tennis coaches out there that can coach world class level
Mhm,
tennis
mhm,
players. But then if
mhm.
you bring them an 8 year old, they
They won't know
don't
what to
want
do with them.
nothing. Yeah, they don't know, they don't even want to be on the court with
It
them,
doesn't mean that you're a better quality coach just because you train with professionals, because
Absolutely.
it requires a particular level of patience,
Sure.
tactics, know-hows to engage and have that child that's sitting there looking up at the sky, probably
Sure.
scratching his head, trying to fence with his racket with his buddy, or
Right.
shouting at his other friend, and
Yeah.
having them all engage together and having them connect with you. And these are things that we can as well go into on another
Yeah.
another day. So
So
I'm
I,
sorry,
I
go ahead.
I really see the importance of tennis being more of a community, and I really want to, like we're doing with this podcast, bring everybody in and let it be more inclusive. Because I would tell you, when I was a kid and my dad would coach me, this is how my day would go, is I would train for maybe 1 hour after school. My dad was a teacher. So let's say 3 o'clock, school is out, at about 3:30, I'm on the tennis court with my dad.
Coach Solomon.
We would coach he would coach me for an hour. And then after that hour, he would go play with his buddies for a few hours, and I would just be sitting there. I would either sit on the court, or I would go on the park, or a lot of times I wanted to play tennis, but nobody would play with me. And I think that is why I'm so open.
Yeah.
No, like, yeah, it's a sad story. And every time I say that, people are like, oh, poor Josh. But like, I feel like that spilled into where I'm at today, where I'm like, it doesn't matter who is out there. I'll hit with anybody. It doesn't bother me. Like, yes, I can be what.
Broke that obstacle. You kind of thought, okay, let me go out there and reach out to people so I feel included, so that I can start seeing my true potential. So,
and I didn't even realize how important that was until I like joined the military and I left, because my community here in Central Florida, where I play tennis and I learned how to play, like everybody in that community just shows up and plays tennis, where in a lot of places in the United States, a lot of times you have to be part of a club, you have to be a member of that club,
you
have to have your 4 players, and you guys are all pitching in to pay for the court time. You have to pay for court time. And these are all things that I just was like oblivious to growing up in my community, because my community, the courts are free. People can show up and play. Like Tuesday nights, people just show up and play doubles. And I kind of took that for granted, because when I go to other places and I'm like, hey, you guys need a 4th? They're like, no, he's coming. Or, people just like, oh, no, like really standoffish, which is okay. But I just didn't realize how that community is. And I didn't understand how my community was. But now that I have a more understanding of it, I'm like, man, I think there should be more communities like mine, where like people can just show up and play, and it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't necessarily.
There are, I think, more so, because
Sure.
back in the day in Greece, we didn't have any public courts per se, more clubs. Right. But I feel I've started noticing a lot of they're including more novice players, and they're including more people, and I feel that's the only way for you to. I think we have it in our minds where, oh, I'm not part of that, so I shouldn't try. And I like that you mentioned that. Why assume and not go for it? I'll give a perfect example. You gave us the example of, I didn't feel included. Let me go out there and ask. You're going to get so many no's, and at one point you're going to say a yes. And from that one player, you're going to meet another player. When if you hadn't asked me to play, we wouldn't have hit. Because when we say hit in the tennis language, we mean playing tennis, like just knocking up a few balls, rallying,
hitting back and forth.
And so we developed a great friendship after that.
For sure.
And for you, it felt great that I wanted to play tennis with you. But do you want to know this? On my end, I felt honored that a male tennis player gave me enough interest to want to play tennis, because let's all remember, when it comes to a certain level of tennis, it's hard for a professional college player to play with someone that just picked up a racket. It's not like we're just bouncing the ball back and forth in basketball and we're just throwing hoops. Not saying that beginner can't end up playing like that professional, and not that all people are included. But when you are at a college level or a certain level, it is hard for the one that is capable of playing to enjoy it, because you do need a level of discipline, patience, and to improve your skills in tennis when you're a beginner. But I was really and I was also taken back how you were interested in engaging in these conversations with tennis. I never had a male. They would say, let's just hit, because they would see me play and coaching. But to take it to that level where we're discussing all these topics, I think we've both surprised each other.
Yeah. And ultimately with this podcast, we want to use it to open up a community. It might just be an online community, but I think that can turn into an on-court community where we can really make a difference in this game. And that's part of the reason why I coach, is because I know the benefits that I've gotten from playing tennis and learning how to play and dealing with tough matches and difficult mindsets, and, where my backhand's broken and I can't fix it. And, the frustration that you feel on the court, you're all alone and all this stuff. I feel like it spills over into your life so much. And I want to be able to help out the players and the clients and the students that I have, so that they can maybe not make the same mistakes that I made, and also be better tennis players than me, and even, have a better life because of it.
Absolutely.
There's so many things I want to touch on with this podcast, and there's so many different ideas, not only tennis, but as well, like
That's something I
life
wanted to,
ideas.
sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt you,
you're
Josh.
good. You're good.
Everything that we're going to be discussing regarding skills, tactics, techniques,
Sure.
discussions around sports, not just tennis, you can apply to many other sports. And
Right.
this is why I love our idea of our podcast, because I was mentioning to Josh that I love the idea that we're going to be discussing everything about tennis, but we also want to make it a podcast to where we can include other ideas or conversations on other sports as well, and include human psychology into it, because we all have to remember our psychology is first. You make that decision to go ask someone to play tennis, you start hitting with them, you create a relationship, your game
Right.
improves, you meet another person, you might find a coach that might lead you to playing high school, to college. So it's all a domino effect, and that's the same that can also be applied to our life in general. So this is we want to take this podcast to another level, not just a tennis podcast.
Now, I do have one more tennis subject that we haven't really discussed, and
Yeah,
you might not know it's coming, but I want to get your thoughts, and I could share first if you like.
go ahead.
Would you mind sharing a emotional frustration or a frustrating match that comes to mind, or even a practice that might come to mind?
Too many,
And
Josh, too
what
many.
did you do? And I'm talking about worst case, like what did you do? And
I didn't know this was
how
coming, and I
did you
thank you for this.
how did you handle that frustration? You know,
Not well,
yeah.
Josh.
Let me know.
Not well.
It's you and me.
Do you want me to say in general how I handled, or one
If
particular
you want to share
situation?
the story, that'll be awesome. If you don't feel like you want to share the story, that's okay. But
I will mention one story. There
sure.
are many, but I will mention one story. I was playing up in Georgia. We were playing nationals for
Yeah.
our NAIA, and I was hitting in. Mind you, this is what got to me. I knew my potential and my abilities, but my
Right.
emotions always got the best of me. I was playing
Sure.
against this girl, and she was moonballing everything. Mind you,
What does moonball mean? What is that?
where
What is a
they just hit the
moonball?
ball all the way up, and it's like playing tennis but lobbing every ball, like pushing every ball.
Oh, yeah, I know moonball. No, I know exactly what
So
you mean.
so here is my problem back then. Maria back in her 20s or early 20s.
Hmm.
Uh, Instead of using that to my advantage and changing my game,
Yeah.
I didn't handle it very well. I
Mm.
allowed my ego and my frustrations to get the best of me. And instead of me conquering that match and beating her because I felt like I was at a better level than her, guess who I beat?
Who?
Myself.
Of course.
And nowadays, I would have, of course, we can all say, well, if I had my mindset now with the talent and ability I had when I was younger, who knows where I would be right now.
Right.
I wish I could have managed my emotions and my mental strength a little bit different.
Sure.
But I didn't handle it very well at all. I'll admit it. And
Well,
plenty of nerves.
how would you handle it differently today? How would you
Today.
if you're put in that same situation, a
Mhm.
player is giving you all these kind of law balls, giving you junk balls, things you don't like, things that you're already missing and you're making mistakes on. What would you do today to maybe change your mindset or
What I
maybe
do
even
with
change your
everything that
result?
I yeah, what I do with everything now that I utilize in my life in general. I've changed as
Mhm.
a person. I think who you are as a person affects your game. Your personality comes out in your game. I
So
was
what's the
very
biggest change as a person? Yeah, let me
The
know.
biggest change for me recently,
Yeah.
the last several years, I've learned to be more mindful, more thoughtful. When
Yeah.
I say thoughtful, I allow myself a little bit of time to think. When
Sure.
you react before you think, you make very poor decisions. So
Absolutely.
I used to feed off emotion. I
Right.
thought emotion was key to everything,
Right.
because we can dwell on that another day as well.
Yeah.
But I just based everything off emotion.
Yeah.
Now I allow myself to say, okay, I don't like that. How can I make it better?
Hmm.
Back then, I didn't like it, but I didn't think, how can I make it better? My ego was bigger than the world. And I was like,
Right.
oh, how could she win this point?
Sure.
I'm a better player, and, this is not happening. And, I didn't focus on how to change my tactics. So nowadays, I
Yeah.
would say, okay, well, let me take a breather. What is not working for me? Anything that you continue to do that's not working for you is just pointless.
Yeah.
So we need to make a change. What is that change? That
Yeah.
change is, okay, instead of just thinking about how I'm feeling and how frustrated I am, you have to think about, what do I need to do for this point, in order for me to take her down.
Yeah.
So I would probably change up the pace, move her around to where she's not comfortable with, and
Yeah.
just work through the point. And I find a lot of players lose to players that just push the ball because it brings their level down. So
Absolutely.
ultimately, you lose to yourself. You
Yeah.
have to stop thinking of everything as oh, she's going to beat me, and what's going to happen after that, and just get
Sure.
your emotions the best of you. I think when you look at an entire match or a season or a school year, and you think of all the things that you have to do, we're human. No one fixes all their problems or conquers the goals that they want all in one day or all in one thought.
You're right.
Everything happens step by step. And it's
Yeah.
also telling yourself, it's okay, you made a mistake. And I used
Yeah.
to beat myself up. It's
Yeah.
okay. If I make a blunder here on this podcast, it's okay. If
Yeah.
someone doesn't agree with something, it's okay. So
For
I
sure.
feel like I found inner peace in myself as a human being. And I think
Yeah.
that the people that are more peaceful inside are able to execute on the outside a lot calmer, differently.
Yeah.
Um, I think that's
Yeah.
a very important topic. And again, that's something else we can talk about more in depth.
If Yeah, I think, one thing with this podcast, I also want to use it to help players that are dealing with typical tennis player things like this, being frustrated on the court or playing against a player that you should be beating and you're losing. How do you handle that? And I want to share my story if you don't mind. But
I was going to
I
ask you, but I didn't want to interrupt you.
no, you're good. Man, it wasn't the other day, but it was probably about 2 years ago. And I was playing double. I got invited to play doubles with some high level players, and at the time, I'm like, I can hang, I could do it, I could play that good, I can hang out with these guys, and I'm gonna show them that I can hang with these guys, So I'm coming into the
Mhm,
match with that kind of mindset, and I don't think there's nothing wrong with that mindset, but what
mhm,
I ended up doing with it wasn't too well. So I'm at the net, and the guys I'm playing with are playing very well, and
mhm.
um they scream, they're hitting the ball really hard at me, and I'm at the net, and I miss a volley. A volley is when you hit a shot out of the air and you don't let it bounce. So I'm close to the net, the ball comes to me, I go to stick my racket out and I miss it, right? And if you play doubles and you see somebody and they miss a volley, what do? You hit another shot at them so they can miss another volley, right? To see, oh, okay, is it just a miss, or do they just not have good volleys? And that day and I counted it, I end up missing
Mhm.
5 volleys in a row, 5 back to back, not point after point, but every time they hit to me at the net, I missed it. And it was
Yeah,
5 in a row. And each
yeah.
one, I'm steaming. I'm getting more angry and more angry and more angry and more angry. Now I'm on the court where I also coach. And this is definitely the last time I've ever thrown my racket. But I'm so frustrated because I'm thinking, how can I be playing at this level? How can you miss easy volleys like this? This is,
It's
you're
that
getting into yourself.
expectation
It's
factor
that
that if
expect.
you're expected to do well, that's when you feel like you make errors. I know.
Absolutely.
I know
I'm
that
thinking, how can
feeling.
I miss these volleys? These are super easy volleys. They're right there in my strike zone. I can get it. And I
Mhm.
kept missing it. And next thing I know, I launched my racket at the fence, right? And I was so disappointed at myself. I was like, I almost can't get that visual out of my head, because one thing about me is I like to stay calm, cool, and collected, and I don't really like to for people to see me lose it. And I felt like that was one of those moments where I lost it, and I just kind of launched the racket at the fence, and
Mhm.
uh it wasn't quite intentional. But in tennis, when you let yourself get that angry or let yourself get that frustrated, you do things and you act out, right?
Mhm.
So from then on, I'll kind of let you know what I've changed. From then on, I have decided to make a different action. If I make a mistake on the tennis court, I automatically think, what did I do wrong? And what even my body, what I do with my body is I
Can I
literally.
ask you a
Sure, go
question real
ahead.
quick? Usually when someone's very mad, they don't want to think, what did I do wrong? They want to act out.
Right.
How do you get from wanting to explode and to that moment where you're able to calmly ask yourself, what did I do wrong? What do you think, what would help you?
I think a couple things will help you. One is practicing and feeling capable, because if you feel like there's no hope, then I feel like you might spiral out of that, right? So like if you have one of those matches where you just anything you did just didn't go your way, you need to practice more, right? But
Do
in
you think
that
it could be
position,
also a habit forming too?
so
If you
sorry.
if you practice asking yourself, like maybe the first time you'll be like, oh, what did I do wrong? And then the next
Right,
time, oh, what did I do wrong? And then calmly, what did I do wrong? Like, as you do it so many times, then
right.
maybe it becomes a habit.
Well, I would
Then,
say with me, let's say I miss a
mhm,
forehand and it goes into the net, right? I hit a shot on my
mhm,
forehand side. My forehand's very strong. I feel very confident with my forehand, but I end up making a mistake in that shot and went into the net, right? Then what I
mhm.
end up doing, the minute I miss a shot, like I don't wait, because if I wait, I'm gonna let it bubble up. The minute I miss a shot, I will actually shadow swing the same exact shot, right? So
Yes.
that when I do miss it again, my result, I would say 9 times or 10 times out of 10 is better. My result is better. So if I get the same shot and I still miss it, it's closer to going in than it was the last one. Do you see what I'm saying? So like,
Mm.
it's not like I miss a forehand and I'm like, oh, and then I miss another forehand. I'm like, oh, I miss a forehand and I say, what did I do there? Oh, maybe I didn't brush up enough, right? And then, okay, I brush up
Mhm.
enough and now the ball hits the net. I'm like, okay, well, I'm closer. Let me shadow swing again. Now my mindset is not on my frustration. My mindset is actually you did better than what you did last time. Last time you hit straight into the middle of the net and you missed it
Oh,
pretty
I think
bad.
we're losing you there.
Yeah, it froze for a second. Did you hear what
Yeah,
I said?
yeah. I heard you saying how you might not get the result straight away, but
It
each
gets
time you
better.
make that error, it gets a little bit better as you tweak it a little bit.
Right.
I might need to change this. I might need to change that to make the improvement. And I
Right.
think also we need to not. I think we have unrealistic expectations on ourselves. Oh,
Absolutely.
I hit 9 backhands down the line in the net. How is that possible out of
Right.
10?
Right.
Okay, let's try and hit maybe 7 in the net instead of 9. Like maybe get two
Right.
more balls over. And I think we assume that by fixing something, we have to go from A to Z, from
Mhm.
A hitting a poor shot to Z always hitting an excellent shot. And that just
Sure.
doesn't. I think we're very hard on ourselves, and I think that's
Right.
why we get frustrated and it's not realistic. How can we expect ourselves to uh, feel? We have to learn to accept that we can't fix a problem or a technique or anything in one shot. It does
No.
take time, as you mentioned. So we have to realize that. And I think if we're aware of that, we won't be so hard on ourselves. Therefore,
Right.
we won't be so angry.
And,
And
and
then
I
you
think,
do. Mhm.
yeah, you're right. And I think, this is something I tell all my clients and all my players is you don't want to make the same mistake twice. So
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
and I know it's easier said than done, but for me, let's say I miss a ball, a serve in the net, then
Mhm.
I don't want to miss the next 4 serves in the net. What I want to do is maybe try to hit
Mhm.
long. Okay, it went long. Okay, let's get somewhere in between
Or
there,
instead of
the
saying,
net and
don't
the
hit
long.
it in the net, what do I need to do to lift it a little bit more? It's like looking at
Right.
the glass half full instead of half
Sure.
empty, like, oh, I'm going to lose this match. Instead of
Right.
thinking that, what do I need to do on the next shot to improve to get it over? And then you do it again and then again. And before you know it, you might even win the match. So I think
And
that's another thing that we learn with maturity and as we grow older, and we learn to improve on our mistakes.
And if you
So
could tell from this conversation, tennis is such a mental sport, you know. Yes, it
huge.
is so physical, but it is also so mental. Especially, in
Absolutely.
matches and when the pressure's on, it's like all mental,
And I think our conversations of the mental aspect will be very important to our viewers because
Sure.
all of us deal with fears and low confidence and so many things that affect us mentally. You'd be surprised how many people would uh, produce great results in the world if only their mindset was slightly different.
Right. So,
So
in conclusion, Maria, we're probably going to start wrapping this thing up. Is there anything that you would like to add to this, or something that you would like to touch on? Maybe
just
tell our
not
audience.
yes, nothing in particular. I don't want to touch up on everything we've talked about. I think we've
Sure.
done a great job covering what we wanted to cover.
Yeah.
One thing I do want our viewers to keep in mind is that we are welcome to all critiques. So we want all your feedback. We
Sure.
want you to mention topics that you'd want us to discuss. We
Right.
will be reading your comments. We are
Yeah.
interested in feedback. We do not know everything. We do not
Yeah.
think we know everything. But one thing we do want is we want mindful engagement.
Right.
It's unfortunate sometimes you see on podcasts or on the news, even like, for example, in Turkey, there was that recent earthquake.
Yeah.
You go from seeing all these families, affected, and then you
Yeah.
get comments about people talking about homosexuality and one person being better than the other person, or
Right.
you get a feminist out there, or you get someone that's just talking about something completely off topic. And
Right.
it's a shame. We have to learn to control ourselves and our words and our boundaries. And I'm all for answering questions or responding to any thing that someone may not agree with us, or if they like something that we're talking about, if they want us
Sure.
to engage more, let us know. But we do ask
Yeah.
that you respect our thoughts. And if you do want a particular answer or something that you don't understand as to why we say something, ask it respectfully so you can get the answer that you want. You can't expect a truthful and a fair answer if you're just saying, hey, I think you're wrong, and you go off on a tangent. So we do want you guys to engage in a respectful manner.
Yeah.
And
We definitely want a community of people that love tennis and people that just love conversating.
lift each other up, not
And
bringing people down.
yeah, we're definitely lifting each other up, and I think that's what we want to do with our podcast.
Awesome.
And things that we've mentioned before, we don't really want to get in the yes, we want to know a little bit more of tennis, but if we have great tennis players on, we kind of want to know their life and how they live, and not just tennis or how well they did in a tournament. We also really want to know what they eat, or what's their diet
I
like,
remember
or
you bringing that up the other day. Yeah.
what's their sleep schedule like, or their workout schedule, things like this, or what kind of clothes do they like, some things that are not
Yeah, why
necessarily
is it that we don't want to
super
know the person, but yet we just want to know the person that's the tennis figure,
right.
what kind of a shot they're hitting, or yeah, we do want to know the type of person they are. And you know what? To finish on a final thought here,
Right.
watching the documentary Breakpoint, which is on Netflix right now.
Oh yeah.
What I love is that you see, of course, you don't get to see the true life of a tennis player because this is a documentary. You can only see so much to an extent.
Right.
But how normal and how down to earth and how these top players are actually just like you and me.
Sure.
And then it makes you wonder, well, shoot, anyone can be a top player if you put the mindset to it. Anyone can be whatever it is that they want, as long
Yeah.
as they work towards it and not give up and be persistent
Right.
and put in the work.
Yeah, give them that motivational speech. Yeah.
Exactly,
Now,
Josh.
Maria, before we sign off, is there anything you would like to tag? Would you like people to follow you on Instagram or follow you or anything? Is there anything up set up for you that you would like them to go see you directly or
Uh,
message you directly or kind of check your stuff out?
Well, for right now, I wouldn't say I have anything on Instagram or on Facebook, but I know that you do. I know that
Yeah.
you have your tennis skills and your tennis. Could you tell
Yeah,
everybody?
I'll put a little link in below, but yes, I have my Instagram. You can find me at josh.tennispressplay, and then you'll see my TikTok as well. I think my TikTok has the largest following and has the most content. It's josh.tennispressplay on TikTok as well.
But I have a
Um,
feeling, Josh, that me and you will probably have our own
hey,
probably TikTok or Instagram in the
definitely
future.
we have a
So
YouTube, Rallying Thoughts YouTube. You can find
definitely.
us on our YouTube page and yeah. Anything in closeout? What would you like to say to our
Nothing. I just
audience?
really enjoyed this conversation. I hope our viewers did. We welcome as much feedback as possible. We look forward to the many episodes to come. Uh, there's nothing better than sitting here talking and discussing topics that we enjoy, that we challenge each other every time
Yeah,
we discuss. It's very fulfilling, and I think that's what we should all strive to do, is do things that are fulfilling, and not just because you have to, or for the, just for the lesson, or just to sell a product. Like,
right.
discuss matters that are difficult, that are
Yeah,
challenging, that are enjoyable.
right.
So that's
It's
my conclusion for today.
oh, this is awesome, man. This is our first ever episode with
I will
Rallying
say
Thoughts
something. Yes,
podcast.
Josh,
What do you
I
got to
will
add,
say
Maria? Go ahead,
something.
throw it in there.
I used to be terrified presenting back in the day in
No
college.
way.
Yes, whenever I was expected to play a match or
Uh-huh.
talk in public, I
Yeah.
would freeze and perform horribly. I will say this is that this is something I never dreamed back in the day I would be doing.
Right.
And
Here we
I've
are.
come along. Here we are. I just don't
Yeah,
believe it, and it feels great.
sure.
So I'm very honored and grateful that you're my friend and that we're able to do this together.
I am honored as well, Maria. Thank you for finally getting this thing done. And I think it's on me, but we definitely got it done. This is episode
No,
one
both
of
of us.
Rallying Thoughts.
Takes
Thank you
two.
guys for watching. Please
Thank you,
look for
guys.
our next one. And we appreciate you watching us. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Take
Thank
care.
you, everybody.